December 1944, the forests of the Ardennes were silent under a heavy blanket of snow. Tall pine trees stood frozen, their branches weighed down by ice, and narrow roads twisted through the hills like veins through a lifeless body. For most Allied soldiers, this region was considered quiet, almost irrelevant, a place to rest battered divisions, to train replacements, and to wait for the final push into Germany. The war, many believed, was nearly over. They were wrong. Adolf Hitler, cornered and desperate, had prepared one final massive counteroffensive. He believed that if he struck hard and fast, he could shatter the Allied front, capture the vital port of Antwerp, and force Britain and the United States into negotiations. It was a gamble that defied logic, reality, and the advice of his own generals. But Hitler had never been a man guided by reason in defeat. In the early hours of December 16, 1944, the silence of the Ardennes exploded. German artillery thundered across the American lines, shells tore into snow, covered foxholes, supply depots, and command posts. Telephone wires were shredded, roads vanished under smoke and fire, and then, through the fog and falling snow, the armor came. Panzer divisions, some of the last powerful formations Germany had left, rolled westward. Tigers, Panthers, and Panzer Roman, fours crushed trees and fences beneath their tracks. Behind them marched veteran infantry units, many hardened by years of brutal fighting on the Eastern Front. Their objective was clear: punch through the thin American defenses before the Allies could react. In one sector of this collapsing front, fewer than 700 American soldiers stood directly in their path. These men were a mix of infantry, engineers, artillery observers, and support troops. Some had never seen combat before. Others were veterans of Normandy and the Hürtgen Forest, already exhausted and hollow, eyed from months of fighting. They lacked heavy weapons, they had almost no armor support, ammunition was limited, food was scarce, winter clothing was often inadequate. What they did have was ground, and orders to hold it. As German forces surged forward, American units were smashed, overrun, or forced to retreat. Entire regiments vanished into the chaos. Road junctions became killing zones. Villages changed hands multiple times in a single day. Confusion ruled the battlefield, but in this one critical position, at a narrow crossroads that controlled movement through the forest, those 700 Americans dug in. German commanders expected a brief delay, a few hours at most. American resistance in the Ardennes had already proven brittle in many places. Once the road was cleared, the panzer columns would race westward, exploiting the breakthrough and achieving the momentum Hitler desperately needed. Instead, they met a wall. The Americans fought from foxholes hacked out of frozen earth. They used fallen trees as barricades. Machine gun teams repositioned constantly, firing from unexpected angles. Artillery observers, cut off from their batteries, adjusted fire with hand, drawn maps and sheer intuition. Engineers wired roads and bridges with explosives, detonating them just as German armor approached. When ammunition ran low, soldiers scavenged from the dead. German infantry attacked first, probing the defenses. They were met with disciplined rifle fire, machine guns firing until barrels glowed red, and grenades tossed from snow-filled trenches. Each attack cost the Germans time, and time was the one resource they could not afford to lose. Then the tanks came. Panzer units pushed forward under cover of fog, their engines rumbling through the trees. American bazooka teams waited in silence, letting the tanks pass before firing at their thinner rear armor. Some shots bounced off uselessly, others struck true, turning steel monsters into burning coffins. Every destroyed tank blocked the road behind it. Every minute of delay rippled outward, disrupting schedules, fuel consumption, and coordination across the entire German offensive. German commanders grew frustrated. They had expected panic. Instead, they found stubborn, relentless resistance. Orders were shouted, more units were committed. Artillery was brought forward to smash the American positions into rubble. But the Americans did not break. Messages from higher headquarters never arrived. Radio contact was sporadic or completely lost. Many of these men had no idea what was happening beyond their immediate surroundings. They did not know they were facing 4 panzer divisions. They only knew that the enemy kept coming, and that retreat meant collapse. The cold was merciless. Temperatures dropped well below freezing, weapons jammed. Fingers went numb, wounded men froze to death before medics could reach them. Snow turned pink and then black under constant shelling. Still the line held. German fuel shortages began to show. Tanks idled longer than planned. Infantry units outran their supply columns. American roadblocks, blown bridges and ambushes forced constant detours through narrow forest paths, slowing the advance to a crawl. Above all, the delay gave the Allies something priceless: time to react. While those 700 Americans fought and died in the snow, Allied command began to understand the scale of the German attack. Reserves were rushed forward. Airfields prepared to launch aircraft once the weather cleared. Armored divisions were redirected toward the Bulge forming in the lines. The German timetable, so critical to the success of the offensive, was already collapsing. By the time German forces finally overwhelmed parts of the American position, days had passed instead of hours. The road they needed was choked with wreckage, fuel was dangerously low, Allied resistance was stiffening everywhere, the moment was gone, Hitler's great counteroffensive never recovered its momentum. And it was here in this frozen forest that the impossible had happened. A handful of American soldiers, cold, isolated, outnumbered, had stopped the spearhead of Nazi Germany's last major offensive, not with superior numbers, not with better equipment, but with endurance, discipline, and refusal to yield. Many of them would never leave the Ardennes. Some were captured after fighting until their ammunition was gone. Others were killed where they stood. A few survived, carrying the memory of those days for the rest of their lives. History would later remember the Battle of the Bulge as a massive clash of armies. Generals and divisions would fill the pages of textbooks. But buried within that vast battle is this truth: sometimes the fate of a war does not turn on millions of men. Sometimes it turns on 700 soldiers who simply refuse to move.